Welcome to CannaBiz with Canna-Chris. I'm Chris Danny, also known as Canna-Chris, and I'm with my co-host, Austin Slutsky. Today we're talking about how to boost your business's online visibility. Let's get started. Austin, what's new in cannabis?
So we got a brand new bill being introduced in Congress that would finally allow federal workers some protection from being fired for their marijuana use.
So did they have any protections before this?
There are pretty much no protections for any sort of employment when it comes to marijuana use. In the pre-employment process, most employers require some sort of drug test, and then once you're in employment, pretty much regardless of the situation, an employer can test you at any time, and if they find any presence of marijuana, they can pretty much let you go regardless of the reason.
So it sounds like this is a strict zero tolerance policy right now.
Yeah, exactly. And this is specifically for federal workers. Obviously, if you're a private company, you can do pretty much what you want when it comes to your drug enforcement policy and what sort of drug testing you do. But it would allow federal workers who consume cannabis as long as they are in compliance with their state laws. So this would not be a blanket protection for all federal workers, only those that already have a medical marijuana regime in place and set up.
Well, hey, I got some sweet news for you.
How sweet are we talking?
It's my favorite candy, so check it out. David Klein, the creator of jelly beans, just announced that he's planning to start making CBD jelly beans. And I think they're already underway. Yes, let me tell you a little bit more about it. They're going under the name Spectrum Confections. A little background on David. He actually sold the jelly bean title to a company early in his career, so he had to go under another name when he started producing these. And they're planning to make 38 different flavors of CBD-infused jelly beans. Toasted marshmallow,
Ooh.
mango, and even strawberry shortcake. And as far as the jelly beans go, individually infused with 10 milligrams of CBD, the equivalent of one dose. And that's kind of the industry practice you see across the board.
I mean, pretty much stay with typical assumed practices and something that's a little familiar for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So the packages themselves, they're going to be packaged in 7-day supplies. And so in an interview with David, they asked him, the newspaper, they were saying, hey, what are your thoughts on THC-infused jelly beans? Do you think that's a possibility? And right now it appears that they're just focusing on CBD jelly beans. But David did rule out in the future that there could be THC-infused beans.
I mean, I can totally understand. At this point in the regulations, it makes more sense to pivot towards the CBD while that is getting a lot more steam for, being legalized everywhere and being much more universally accepted. And then once THC kind of catches up, to kind of flip it into that market as well.
Yeah, and to go off that note, just working in regulations, it's a lot harder to have THC-infused products just because you have to worry about, what if you overserve someone, things like that. So CBD seems to be the safer route at the moment, and hopefully this goes national and we can get some over here in Ohio.
But we got some good news finally coming out of Ohio.
Oh yes.
So Grow Ohio was awarded the first processor certificate of operation by the Ohio Department of Commerce, which would finally allow processed cannabis items to be sold in Ohio.
So by processed items, what all does that include?
So these are basically everything except for the flower itself. These would be all your topicals, tinctures, any sort of gummies or other edibles, and then even your vaporizers and cartridges. Basically everything we see in any other medical and adult use state finally being allowed in Ohio.
So a question on that point, and if David's listening, pay attention to this one. Jelly beans?
We could maybe see jelly beans.
Maybe jelly beans, okay.
Jelly beans could
there
be
we
allowed.
go. All right.
But at this point, still in the process, and hopefully we'll start seeing them in the next coming months. We have maybe tinctures coming out April, gummies a little bit later, and then probably lotions and capsules will probably be early summer at that. But yeah, Grow Ohio's planning to harvest tens of thousands of pounds of marijuana, and maybe they'll turn it into a lot of great products for the people all around Ohio that really need it.
Well, hey, fingers crossed, and if anyone's listening out there, jelly beans. Thanks for updating us on what's happening in cannabis. For all of our listeners out there, make sure to like and subscribe to our podcast. Up next, we're bringing on our special guest to tell us a little bit about herself and how to increase your business's online visibility. Coming on to our show today, we have the queen of digital marketing, Amna Shamim. Welcome to the show, Amna.
Hey, Chris. It's nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So let's get straight to it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of digital marketing?
I had a really weird route in where I stumbled across SEO and the magic of SEO and being visible through Google and Bing and leveraging those platforms. And I fell in love and started studying and experimenting and have just really been impressed by the power of digital marketing, the way we tune everything else out because we know we're being so advertised to. Digital's where we live a lot of our lives.
heard you mention SEO, and like I've seen it thrown around here and there. Can you tell us a little about what that is and why it's so important, especially now?
Sure. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, and it means ranking in Google and to a lesser extent Bing and all the other search engines. It's people use Google to find information, whether it's a restaurant menu or an orthodontist or flight tickets or just anything. Our first instinct is to pull up Google and look for it. So if you can get your company on page 1, ideally in the first 3 spots or in the little maps pop out, that's unbelievably powerful. And the number of people who will visit your site dramatically increases.
So what are some examples you have of SEOs and how can they help a business grow?
It depends. I work primarily with local businesses and e-commerce businesses because that's where I think SEO can have a really, really big impact. To be able to be visible when you're searching. But find the first viable option who looks credible that you can trust, and that's who you're going with.
Or like you said, like even going past like the first 3 options, because most of the time you can find what you're looking for right there. You know, it's not like you're doing constant research to find the absolute best source or the one that's, you know, the absolute closest to you. You're just looking at for the first best looking option, the one that makes the most sense in the given situation.
Well, Google is smart, and we trust Google to have gone through and found the things that are relevant to what we need. And they do a pretty good job of it. So there's no reason for us to go onto page 2 or 5 or keep looking all the way at the bottom of the page.
And so for Google, how do they rank these pages? How do you get ranked to be on the first page?
Making sure if you're a local business that your name, address, and phone number are available on your site. If Google can't find it, they're not going to show you. And if they can't find it, neither can the people visiting your site. And if someone can't call you, they're going to move on.
You're absolutely right. Why go there when we can go to the Walgreens of cannabis and just get your product there?
And because Google is using geolocation so heavily to give you relevant local results, this is incredibly important, especially for small businesses, especially in cannabis, because SEO is one of the most important things cannabis companies can leverage, and not a lot of them are doing it.
As far as SEO goes, what companies have you seen do a really good job optimizing their SEO searches?
I mean, all the big ones. All the big ones are really, really good at it. And then, truthfully, go into Google and search for anything you can think of and look at the top options. Because if there's a little map or that has those 3 or 4 options listed, or a little pop-out that answers your query, that site is doing a good job.
So really, SEO is just kind of, in layman terms, having basic information on your website so people can find it, basic questions people are going to ask right when they walk in, like, hey, what do you sell? What's your product line? All that good stuff.
I mean, SEO is a lot of things, but the biggest thing is knowing what your clients are looking for and giving them that information. Whether it's your address, your phone number, the answer is probably yes. But what are your hours? What kind of products do you have? What kind of services? Like, you need to understand who your audience is and be able to help them. And that's how Google determines it.
Yeah, make sure you have all that information readily available so Google can kind of have something to latch on to, because without that, you're kind of just going to be, you know, a leaf in the wind, and no one's going to really be able to, you know, find out, like you said, where you are, how to contact you, or even when you're, you know, available.
Absolutely. And if somebody finds your site and you don't have the information that they're looking for and they bounce, Google's paying attention to that. They're paying attention to how quickly people run away from your site on their phone. So mobile page speed and mobile responsiveness is huge. You can tank your SEO with those 2 things because they're so important, which means if you're doing things like, not that you can in the cannabis industry really, but running ads, then all that traffic from your ads could actually be negatively impacting your SEO rankings because all of these people are bouncing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You really got to put your company in the forefront and in a good place where everyone can see you and the way you want to be seen. Well, thank you for starting us off. Tell us a little about yourself and a little bit about SEOs. We're going to take a quick break and reminding all of our subscribers to listen, subscribe, share this episode, and we'll be back shortly to get some more insight.
Welcome back, Amna. Today we're going to be finishing up, just learning a little bit more about SEO and online visibility. So let's get straight to it. How do you help a business grow its online visibility?
Well, what I do depends on what is a good fit for the business. So the first thing I like to do is sit down and figure out who their audience is, and then that informs everything from the type of content to the platforms to, I mean, just literally everything.
Okay, so you really have to know your audience. And for this part of the segment, I'd like to use my own personal hypotheticals. I always do this on the show. I don't know why. It's a bad habit. But let's say there's a mom and pop dispensary located in Denver, Colorado. Mostly recreational users.
Well, it depends on where they are, what the rules are, and who their marketing too. So the first thing I like to sit down and do and figure out who their audience is. And that'll inform everything from the type of content that's produced to where we try and connect with them to the language that we use. I mean, it's good marketing is speaking to an individual instead of everybody. Because if you talk to everybody, nobody pays attention. But if you talk to one person and address their issues and their questions and their concerns, they're all in. They love what you're saying.
So outside of SEOs, how do you get that one person's attention, as representative of the market?
I mean, that it can be through paid ads, it can be through placements in publications, or whether that's a magazine or newspaper, another company's blog or newsletter. It can be social media is really powerful if you get on the right platforms for your audience. And hey, podcasts are really fantastic too.
But you caught my attention with the social media part. Have you noticed that there's any certain social media that certain demographics are more active on that pertain to businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to connect with really young people, then Instagram is much more popular. If you're connecting with professionals, managers and above, LinkedIn is much more powerful. Actually, what's really interesting is how powerful Twitter is in the cannabis industry, because it is this really incredible direct response platform that isn't censoring cannabis the way other platforms are. I'm sure you remember the shutdown of YouTube, a lot of the YouTube channels last year for cannabis. That was really scary. And it made a lot of people realize that if you're using somebody else's platform and you don't have your own, then that rug can be snatched out from under your feet.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that. I know we've talked about on previous episodes the potential for Facebook for kind of rolling back some of their more stringent regulations when it comes to cannabis communities and potentially sales on Facebook itself. So it's good to hear that there is a platform like Twitter that probably isn't as active when it comes to shutting down those accounts. And like you said, it has that direct to consumer, that instant connection that isn't really in the same format for a lot of other social media apps.
No, it's really powerful, and it's not a place you can have those really long, in-depth conversations, but it's a great place to connect with people and engage in a light way and then direct them to other information. Like one of the best things you can do with Twitter is connect with other people and drive them to your website, drive them to other material that they will find interesting. But to do that, you have to know what they find interesting.
I know the big way that we use Twitter is to make sure that we can drive people directly towards, our podcast itself.
Absolutely. And people probably love it. They love that Twitter is somewhere they can get updates from you guys, and they can hear what's new, and they can hear, I'm sure you're sharing some other information. It's not just, hey, our new podcast episode is out. And they're loving that. They're loving getting to know you in a way that doesn't feel hard and scary, and like they can turn off as much as they want and they can come back when they want.
I can understand that. We also have an Instagram, and on there we post a little bit more of our personal lives. And just on that note, I think social media is one of the most powerful forms of advertisement, especially for new businesses, for all the entrepreneurs out there. It's entirely free to use Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can grow a business off that.
As long as you don't get shut down.
As long as you don't get shut down.
Yeah, so the cannabis industry is a little bit more sticky, so you have to be careful there. But transitioning into that, have you noticed that there are any rules or laws that make it especially difficult for cannabis businesses in general to market themselves?
I mean, there are so many rules and laws, and every state is different, which is why we're seeing a lot of businesses stick to one state or expand very, very carefully, because every time you expand, like I know for myself, and I will 100% admit this to everybody who asks, I can't keep track of every state. And so I keep track of the ones that my clients are in right now. And when I get a new client, I catch up on what's happening. But things like you can't market to children or be appealing, that's across the US. Like, forget it. If it looks like a kid's going to want to eat it, this is going to be a problem. Which part of why I find the jelly beans thing so interesting. I want to see what they're doing as far as labeling or differentiating.
Oh yeah, no, comment just on that, fingers crossed, hope it happens. But yeah, that's a good point you brought up, because jelly beans, traditionally, when you think about them, you think of kids, you think of like a store, you get them on the road or whatever. They're just a nice little snack to have.
Yeah, and there's a company out there, Baked Smart, I think it is, that has really great labels for people to put on their edibles at home. And I think this is personally, I think some sort of standardized labeling should exist so that kids can be taught, don't eat this one.
Well, we can certainly advocate for that. And just going back to SEO, digital marketing, what are some quick, easy ways a startup business could really optimize their online visibility without initially consulting someone before, I guess you could say, before they need to get someone like yourself to come in to really help them out?
Well, I'll just tell you the first couple things I check on every website. I make sure there's HTTPS, which is an SSL certificate, because Google has not officially told people that they're penalizing for non-secure sites, but they are. They don't admit these things, but they do. Check that your website is mobile responsive. Check what your load speeds are. There are free tools online to check for these things. Check that you have a robots.txt file and an XML sitemap. Load the Yoast free plugin and check what your SEO is like. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good for a free app.
Okay, and I'm not entirely sure what all those are. For me, at least, I like to think of myself as a simple man. And I'm not too involved with SEO. Can you kind of backtrack a little bit and lay it out in a little, I guess, easier term? Mm-hmm.
So things like, if you're mobile responsive, it means that your site looks good on a phone and on an iPad and on a computer, no matter what size. Mobile page load speed and normal page load speed are just a question of how fast your website loads. XML sitemap it allows Google to crawl your site and it makes it easier for people to navigate. Robots.txt file tells Google to crawl your site and index it so that you can show up in the search results. And if you're on WordPress, Yoast is a free plugin you can get no matter where your host server is. You just go into your WordPress page and you Google for Yoast SEO plugin. The Yoast process will take you 1 minute to install it. And then you can go and review all of your blog posts and it'll give you feedback and suggestions for improving it. And it'll cover a lot of the more nuanced, not super nuanced, but more nuanced stuff like making sure you have a nice page, your URL looks good, your title looks good, you have filled in the meta descriptions. Don't need to be explained because the plugin will explain it to you.
It's really amazing hearing you talk about all these different factors that we don't think about on more of like a macro level, you know, like you said, like a mobile website that isn't actually formatted for mobile. I mean, I know I have seen it and been like, what are these people doing? You know, I'm already trying to distance myself. I'm looking for more reasons not to use, you know, certain websites, and to hear it explicitly described as a reason for people to leave the site. And, you know, even if you were, you know, that first site, you know, you got all the traffic to you, if you don't have a good format right there at the beginning, you can see people leave in droves.
Probably won't be the first site if that's the case, and if you are, you won't be for long because Google will notice your bounce rate and your page load speed time. They will tank you. Once you lose the rankings, it's hard to get them back. It's not impossible, but it is hard.
Yeah, don't want to make it too difficult for yourself. So definitely make sure that you think about what you want to do with your business and how best to provide a lot of information to make it easiest for Google to really latch onto you. And then you don't want to give up that spot. So make sure that you're pretty staying up to date and keep providing all the information that everyone's really looking for. So Amna, if you could tell our viewers where they can connect with you and how they can hear a little bit more work about what you do.
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Amna Shamim NYC. I travel full time, so Instagram is just photos of places I am, but Twitter is a lot more relevant stuff about marketing.
All right, well, Amna, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate all the tips and the advice you've been giving us on how to increase online invisibility, and then also just kind of walking through what some of those terms mean. I, for one, just learned a lot, and so I'm going to need some time to process this. But for all of our listeners out there, we'd like to remind you to subscribe and share this podcast if you enjoy our content. I'm Canna-Chris, also known as Chris Nanny.
And I'm Austin Slutsky.
And we'll see you next week.